drills are planned. In the event of a fire or emergency, the alarm bell will ring continuously. You should vacate the building in an orderly manner through the nearest available exit and make your way to the fire assembly point in the car park. Please can I ask that the live stream is started and verbal confirmation provided when we are broadcasting.
I can confirm, Chairman, the live stream has been started.
Thank you. Welcome to this meeting of the Planning and Regulatory Committee. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for the public viewing on Herefordshire Council website. Please remember your words and actions should be chosen carefully, and members are reminded that speeches are limited to 3 minutes. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and also making a recording. Recording will be made available via the Council's website shortly after the meeting has concluded. Other attendees are permitted to film, photograph, and record the meeting, provided that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. If you do not wish to be filmed or photographed, please identify yourself so that those who intend to record the meeting can be made aware. There are none. To ensure that the recording quality is maintained, could members speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum, and ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silence. Welcome. For all those in attendance, I now ask Mr. Bishop to introduce the officers.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. It's Kevin Bishop, Lead Development Manager for Planning Services. To my right, we have the case officer for the first item, land adjoining Hawthorne Rise. Peter Church, that's Heather Carlisle. And joining us later will be Amber Morris, who will present the application for Juniper Cottage, Pipe Aston. To my left, we have the legal advisor, Ingrid Leckay. And we also have online the highways officer, Katie Jones. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Apologies for absence. We have received apologies from Councillor Polyandros. No other apologies. Name substitutes. Councillor Tillett for Councillor Polyandros. There are no other substitutes. Please indicate declarations of interest. If you wish to declare an interest, I will then call each councillor in their turn. There are no declarations of interest? Then we'll move on to the minutes of the 28th of September 2022. No matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer. So can I have a vote to endorse the minutes of that particular meeting? Those in favour, please show. Those against? Abstentions. 1 abstention. Those not present at that particular meeting. Two, sorry. Right. Now we'll move on to Chairman's announcements. I have no announcements for this meeting. Can I now request that the public speakers present in person for the agenda item 6 join the meeting? Mr. Springmore, Peter Church Parish Council, and Mr. Smith, the applicant's agent. Please, could you take your seat? Thank you. Item 6, the first application. Land adjoining Hawthorne Rise, Peter Church. Planning officer, Ms. Carlisle.
Thank you, Chair, and also thank you to members of this committee who attended the site visit yesterday morning. This application has been redirected to the Planning Committee by the local ward councillor, Councillor Hewitt. The application site is identified in the usual manner by the red star. The recommendation front to members this morning is for approval for an outline application with access reserved for up to 89 dwellings, including 35% affordable housing on a site located in the village of Peterchurch. Peterchurch is positioned about 12 miles west of Hereford and about 9 miles east of Hay on Wye. The village is essentially linear in form, with the B4348 acting as a spine road through the village. Next slide, please. As you can see from the overhead, sorry, next slide, please. Thank you, sorry. As you can see from the overhead aerial photograph, the application site is currently used for agricultural purposes, grade 3 land, and is approximately 3.9 hectares on a T-shaped piece of land. The site lies on the north side of the B438 between the village primary school to the west and modern housing estates, Hawthorne Rise and Crossways to the east. The site has a vehicle access off Hawthorne Rise in the south. The site is within the heart of the village, which has an abundance of amenities, which includes a primary school, high school, shop and post office, public house, doctors, restaurant, church, play areas, fire station, police station and a village hall. The village is also in an area identified in the current core strategy under policy RA2 for proportionate growth, and this is an allocated site within the neighbourhood development plan. Next slide, please. In regards to this planning application, it is outlined with all matters reserved, except for access, and seeks permission for the erection of up to 89 dwellings. An indicative illustrative layout plan has been submitted as seen on this slide. This plan demonstrates up to 89 dwellings and associated elements can be adequately positioned within the application site. However, I stress this plan is not its layout and is only indicative. Next slide. The site lies within the settlement boundary and is crucially allocated for housing development in the Peterchurch Neighbourhood Development Plan. This can be seen on this slide by the area shaded brown, and the proposed development therefore accords with NDP Policy 1 by virtue of comprising land allocated for housing, and it lies within the NDP settlement boundary. The principle of development is therefore considered acceptable in line with the NDP and the Herefordshire Core Strategy. Members will also be aware that this site also benefited from an approval in 2017. As a point of clarification, the site location plan on the 2017 application was larger, but the indicative plan, e.g. the developable area, was the same site area, as was the number of dwellings proposed as the application front of you this morning. Next slide, please. The application is seeking confirmation for access, i.e. if there is accessibility to and within the site for vehicles, cycles and pedestrians in terms of the positioning of the access as well as circulation routes and how these fit into the surrounding access network. However, all other reserved matters such as appearance, landscape, layout and scale are not under consideration. These would come forward with subsequent application for reserved matters. The main access point is close to the entrance of Hawthorne Rise via an agricultural gate. There is a footway which runs along the front of the primary school and in front of the site. There is an existing footway in front of the shop and post office, albeit this is narrow. The high school, Fairfield, is located on the opposite side of the road, and residents would need to cross the B438 to access the school, but currently there is no dedicated pedestrian crossing facility. Next slide. This slide and the next one are primarily for the benefit of members who did not attend the site meeting yesterday, as they insist in demonstrating the context of the immediate area. The photographs show the existing site and the neighbouring Hawthorne Rise development. Next slide. Again, this is to assist with context and also highlights the narrowness of the existing footway outside the shop and the footways outside the site. Next slide. This slide shows the locations of nearby heritage assets, and these are identified by the blue circles. You will note they are located away from the site. This is also covered in paragraph 6.64 of the committee report. Also, can I refer you to the close proximity to the high school and primary school, which are identified by the green circles. The primary school abuts the site. Next slide, please. The proposal would bring forward up to 60 open market houses and up to 29 affordable homes. And Section 106 financial contributions are being proposed for upgrading of connectivity in the form of transport contributions. This is covered in more detail in paragraph 6.8 of the committee report. Also, can I highlight to members the land to the northwest of this application site, which is allocated as a proposed new recreational area, and this is allocated under the NDP policy, but is outside of the application site boundary. However, the proposed development does make allowance for this allocated recreational area to be served by a road. This again is covered within committee report at paragraph 6.83. It is acknowledged that the 1.2 hectares of land continues to be allocated to the recreational ground in the NDP. However, I stress there is no policy requirement for it to be included as part of this application. In respect to ecology, the application has been supported by an updated ecology report, and the River Dore is part of the catchment of the River Wye SAC. Ecology colleagues have reviewed the submission, and at this current time, it is considered, and as advised by Natural England to Ecology, that a HRA is not required. The council ecologists consider this matter further in their comments and have confirmed there is no requirement to consult with Natural England nor Natural Resource Wales. Finally, in regards to drainage and sewage, the council's drainage team have confirmed that they have no objections, subject to appropriately worded conditions. In regards to comments raised from Welsh Water have identified infrastructure capacity concerns. However, the applicant can fund the provision of essential improvements by way of a water requisition, and a pre-commencement condition worded condition has been added. Next slide. To sum up, this is an allocated site within a made NDP, within a village located as settlement for growth within the core strategy, as an area where housing should be allocated. The proposal can deliver up to 89 dwellings with the provision of affordable housing. The application is made in outline with access to be determined. The proposal demonstrates that the means of access is appropriate with the scale of development and can be provided, and officers are of the opinion that the local road network can safely absorb the additional vehicle traffic and pedestrian movement generated from the development. Highway officers have raised no objection to the proposed development. Other technical matters have been assessed and, where necessary, mitigated with conditions. Having regard to the above, this application is therefore recommended for approval along with the conditions proposed as detailed within the committee report. Thank you, Chairman. This brings me to the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Carlisle. I'll now ask the speakers of the speaker and I apologize if I get your pronunciation of your name wrong, Scudamore, to speak on behalf of Priest Church Parish Council. Okay. You have 3 minutes. Thanks.
Dr. President, I think is this on?
Yeah, and keep it fairly close to you.
Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning and Regulatory Committee, the Peter Church Parish Council have general support for the application for outline planning permission. However, we have a number of concerns and reservations which I'd like to briefly outline to you in the hope that you will give due consideration to them when considering the application. It must be stressed that while we accept that some of these issues will be dealt with at a later detailed planning application stage, we consider it important to raise them now in the interest of obtaining a holistic view of the proposed development and any conditions you may decide to place on an approval, should that be your decision. We'd also like to state that rather than delaying any planning determination of this application, we would hope that a pragmatic approach can be taken which addresses the concerns through appropriate conditions. Such an approach would possibly help all parties concerned obtain the optimum outcome, including owners, developers, and the local community of Peter Church. We have 4 concerns. First one, the recent updated response from Welsh Water regarding water supply and sewage treatment is of great concern, particularly in relation to the ecology of the River Dore. There's the question of whether a habitats regulations assessment should be required and whether any recommendations coming from such an assessment should be placed as a planning condition at this stage. Councillor Jenny Hewitt will be expanding on this further. Perhaps a pragmatic solution may be to undertake such an assessment after determination today, but place a condition that due consideration be taken of any recommendations in preparing a detailed application. Such an approach may allow the planning and development process to continue, but to take account of the sensitive nature of the River Door and the environmental concerns at the next application stage. Second point, while not strictly an outline planning issues, members should be aware that the Peter Church community have been trying for over 60 years to obtain a suitable site for a full-size football pitch within the village. The neighbourhood development plan shows the land adjacent to this development as recreational land, and the initial offer of an area of land here was later withdrawn by the developer when Peter Church Parish Council requested an area slightly larger to enable essential associated facilities to be included, and without which obtaining grant funding would be nearly impossible. Such an initial offer was made with the intention that this would be in lieu of any public open space requirements. Number 3, a landscape pedestrian link from the proposed development site linking with Basley Lane would give much easier pedestrian access from the development to the centre of Peter Church Village and its facilities of shops, church, playground, restaurant, pubs, etc., without walking back to the entrance of Hawthorne Rise along a very broken footpath. Fourth and last one, such a pedestrian link could also reduce the need for a separate children's playground actually on the site, as a well-equipped children's playground exists in the centre of the village within easy walking distance of the development site. Any Section 106 monies for a playground could be channeled into upgrading the current playground, which is maintained by the parish council and would benefit the whole village. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I ask Mr. Smith, the planning agent, to speak in support of the application. Mr. Smith.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Paul Smith. I act as co-agent on this application. Your officers have produced a comprehensive report. It's factually correct and, in my view, well reasoned, taking into account all relevant planning policy. The scheme accords in all respects to your adopted policies, including those of Peter Church Neighbourhood Development Plan, which allocates this site for housing and includes it within the settlement boundary. Therefore, the principle of development is clearly established. Your highway officer confirms acceptability, and your planning officers consider that all detailed matters, such as site layout and landscape, can be dealt with properly in a subsequent reserved applications. Essentially, the proposal is near identical to that approved about 5 years ago, when policy was not as supportive as it is now. The benefits of the scheme remain substantial. A significant number of affordable houses, up to 29, which the parish council strongly supports, and considerable sums of money rightly provided for the NHS, highways, sports and play facilities and education. The approval of policy compliance schemes such as these is imperative if the council and NDP are to achieve their housing strategy and ensure 5-year housing land supply. A specific issue has been raised by the parish council that relates to an adjoining allocated recreational ground. It's important to note that the NDP chose not to make the provision of any part of this allocation a condition of this housing scheme. So there's no policy requirement. Originally, the application did include the provision of 1.2 hectares of allocated ground. The parish council at first welcomed the whole application, including this 1.2 hectares. However, the parish council latterly required the provision of 1.6 hectares, or about an area 1/3 larger than was being proposed, and that previously justified by your council in the earlier scheme, 2017. Consequently, the application was amended to omit the provision of 1.2 hectares, replacing it with a more policy compliant payments of about £1,000 per dwelling for sports facilities. Nevertheless, and I want to stress this, the applicant continues to adopt a constructive approach as to how the recreational ground, which remains allocated in the NDP, can be achieved by means other than in this application. He remains open to an approach from the parish council to discuss this matter further. I believe there exist sound planning reasons to grant outline permission for the proposed development. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. The local member is Councillor Hewitt. She speaks first at the beginning of the debate and then has the right to speak at the end of the debate. She does not have a vote, being the local member, and she has a 10-minute allocation of time for you to remarks. Thank you, Councillor Hewitt.
Chair and members of the Planning Committee, thank you for your introduction. I'll try and be brief today. It isn't my usual way, but I think this is
Promises.
central problem here. The proposal in front of us holds the possibility of bringing benefit to the existing community in Peterchurch, providing new homes in an outstandingly beautiful location, improving local amenity and enhancing the sustainability of a rural hub. So I'm in support of the principle of housing provision in this location. I'm in agreement with the parish council in their support of the proposal. However, it's essential for existing residents, for potential home buyers, and for the children who live here and those who will come, that the landscape is respected and the biodiversity of the area is properly considered and protected. It's why people come here to live, and it's an important element of rural sustainability, as the Golden Valley is a significant tourist destination. So I'm in agreement with the landscape officer's appraisal, and I understand it's a reserved matter about the layout of the site. It could be better, and the suggestions put forward in this matter look good ones, designed to beautify, as per the new NPPF, and enhance the development to the well-being of residents and nature. What we want is the optimum outcome for ecology, biodiversity, residents, potential residents, the developer and the applicant. Many aspects of the proposal can be secured in reserved matters, as our officer Heather Carlisle has stated. However, it's not so in HRA. Under the rules, these are not to be secured by condition before appraisal is made of what the likely significant effects are. The logic of this, I believe, is that it allows mitigation to be targeted, appropriate, and not guesswork. So hopefully we don't end up in a situation like the Ludd catchment. In the report before us, ecology state that if the foul water cannot be managed by the local main sewer system, and we have heard from Welsh Water that it cannot, then the potentially significant discharges of 89 houses would trigger this LPA to undertake a formal consultation process with Natural Resources Wales. That is a quote from the ecology statement, updated ecology, prior to any grant of planning consent. That is actually as it should be. It's what HRA says it should be. The ecologist statement couldn't be clearer, and yet no consultation of the sort has happened, despite Welsh Water's updated consultation response. Instead, the officer report seeks to assure the committee that these matters of pollution, and even we hear of potable water capacity supply can be secured through conditionate reserve matters. This is what the regulations say about how habitat regulation need to be conducted. A competent authority, that's Herefordshire, before deciding to undertake or give consent, permission, or other authorization for a plan or project which is likely to have an effect on a European site, and the ecologist has actually pointed us in this direction, either alone or in combination with other projects, must make appropriate assessment of the implications of the plan or project for that site in view of that site's conservation objective. Either HRA is required or it's not. Ecology cannot condition in order to comply with HRA. The rules say that consultation and an assessment of impact must precede any mitigation or conditioning. HRA is not to repair after the damage, which is what we've got in the Ludd catchment, but to understand likely damage before damage is done. Herefordshire Council, as the competent authority, stated through their ecologist consultation response that if the STW doesn't have capacity, then with 89 houses, likely significant effects will occur. And in that case, the LA, it would trigger this LPA to consult with NRW. What we're looking for here is to enable this application to be elegantly and mindfully permitted. But since officers are asserting, despite their own ecologist statements, and contrary to the only legal advice available in the room today, that's the advice, the pro bono advice that I sent to committee members, that HRA is not required for the Dawn, Mollo and Alcombe catchments, then we're in something of a stalemate. Either their ecologist is right and we must consult with NRW, or he's wrong. If he's right, and the legal advice obtained through FTB chambers would suggest that he is, then what needs to be quickly done is to consult with the relevant nature body, NRW, assess likely significant effects, then in consultation with the developer, with Welsh Water and landowner, come up with a system that will mitigate those effects. Welsh Water's response is interesting in that it implies the driver for upgrading our sewage treatment system in Peterchurch may well be planning proposals. If this is the case, this could be a strategic win all round, securing a river that's protected, a development that graces the village and benefits local immunity. I would respectfully propose that this outline planning commission is postponed until consultation with NRW is completed and proposals to mitigate impact of such a large development are brought forward. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Hewitt. And now we'll change public speakers. Oh, yes, can the public speaker return to the gallery? Sorry. Can I say we had I think a very useful site meeting yesterday, and can I now invite the debate, councillor Norman?
Thank you, Chair. And yes, it was helpful and interesting to visit the site, as it always is. It's clear that this is a suitable site on balance, and that in principle, this is where housing should go. The parish are happy with that. The neighbourhood plan appears to have accepted that and is happy with it. So the big question is, what are the problems stopping that from happening? And we just heard from the local member what she thinks those are, and I absolutely agree with her. I think we should be deferring this, and I will propose it until we have a clear indication of where we are regarding the potential pollution of the Dore and the associated rivers. I live in North Herefordshire, Leominster. Development is at a standstill because of the state of the Lug. It's heartbreaking. Any of us walking around see that river, we see it utterly spoiled, lack of wildlife and so on. It's appalling. We've made mistakes in the past as a council. 5 years ago, we had the opportunity to put this on our risk register. We didn't do it. Now, we should not be taking any risk. We should be taking the, what's the term? Precautionary principle, exactly right. And whether it is statutory or not, and I think that's perhaps open to question, that is what we should be doing. We do not want to add to the problems we've already got. We owe it to the community, we owe it to wildlife. We know we're in a serious situation in all these ways. Let's not make it worse. So I really hope we can support the parish in the sense that they get this housing, but let's get on with getting rid of the problems, the things that are holding it up as soon as possible. So I will propose deferral. Thank you.
Is there a second of that?
Sorry?
Bishop, do you want to, I'll leave it to just clarify on the position of the.
Right. Your officer clearly identified there is no need to form a HRA within this area. It's clearly within your report at 6.64. The site does not lie within an area which requires a HRA to be undertaken. You will not being asked to approve the application this morning. You are being asked to delegate the decision of the application to officers in order that the section 106 can be progressed. It will take several months, which is the norm, tends to be the norm. At the end of that period, when the section 106 is signed, a case officer will undertake a further report on the application to ensure that there are no policy changes and that there are no changes to procedures. If at that particular point there have been changes and there is a requirement for a HRA, that would then be undertaken and, if necessary, brought back to committee. But you're being asked in this particular instance to enable the application to progress to the next stage, to enable a section 106 to be produced and move the application forward. Deferring it, just kicking the application further down the line. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Now, I haven't got any other, councillor Bowen, councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Bishop, too, for that enlightenment, and I do understand that. I think one of my major concerns is the provision of potable water and also the sewage. Welsh Water seem to be somewhat, shall we say, undecided about what they can and can't do. If anything, they are saying they can't do it. And until we have assurance from Welsh Water that they can both provide sewage disposal and provision of healthy supplies of potable water, I think we need to be, shall we say, at least looking to make sure that nothing happens until we have total assurance from Welsh Water that they can perform both these functions. That is my major. Otherwise, I think this is a perfectly reasonable proposition, and will probably not enhance the village in many ways, as far as provision of housing and other benefits of the 106, which I do not want to lose. I agree. Also, if they don't build a full number of houses, can you make sure that the affordable house ratio remains pro rata as for now? I think that's important. We mustn't just build all the very properly general housing and not do the affordable housing. That would be a big mistake, I think. So can we make sure that that happens? I'm not quite sure how that would happen legally, but I'm sure our legal representative can ensure we do the right things. So I would like some information and guidance, perhaps from our senior planners, as to the Welsh Water problem, because it is a problem, I think, and we shouldn't just sketch around it. Got to be addressed.
Mr. Bishop.
Sorry, Chair. Thank you, councillor Bowen, on those two very valid points. I'll answer the latter point question first in respect to affordable housing. Just to reassure you, in terms of the section 106 will in terms be worded as such that there will be the requirement for the 35% of the overall number. So yes, it will be in terms of it won't be sort of it will, in terms of the maths, it will be in terms of if a reserve matters came forward with a reduced number, it would still be the 35% of that overall corporate development to reassure you in that matter.
Thank you.
In respect to the your comments from Welsh Water, as you'll note from the committee report, we had got updated comments from Welsh Water, and they've highlighted that in terms of the requirement in respect to the additional work that needs to be done for undergoing further tests within the local treatment works, they recommended within their sort of statutory comments, and we've taken forward in the officer report, that is the requirement, I think, of condition 7, and that is a pre-commencement condition. So, as I say, in terms of the developer, they can undertake that work sort of outside of the planning remit as well in terms of funding that. So your officers are aware of in terms of that potential sort of risk, and that's why, again, in terms of the wording, it's a pre-commencement condition, and it's quite a prescriptive condition that Welsh Water have requested, and that has been put on this through dialogue with Welsh Water. They're happy for that to be included as part of this recommendation.
That's encouraging. I think that we have to make sure that both the sewage and the water supply are adequate at all times, pre-commencement. In which case, I'll probably withdraw my support for deferral. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, my points are around transport and access. Is that, and I enjoyed reading the consultants, the Alpha consultants who raised a number of issues, because we're looking at 89 properties with a potential of 262 additional people who. And it's what I'm concerned about is that we're talking about the access, but actually the implications of the layout of the site and onto the local amenities and facilities. And I'm not able to find a transport survey. Now, I understand transport surveys within rural areas are meant to actually take account of the number of pedestrians, cyclists, and other non-motorised vehicles. So with the proposal to the access, okay, and I understand that that's what we're meant to be focusing on today. But when you're saying that there's an indicative plan, I'm just wondering about what are the proposals that have been set out by Alpha Consultants on widening the primary school footway, having bus shelters, because there's only bus stop, there's no bus stop going to be near the access apparently, a puff and close crossing, a new footway southwest of the B4348, and I just wonder about how, you know, we're going to have more people, we're wanting more children and young families to be walking to primary schools and to the high school, but actually there's limited footway facility along the lane to the high school, and they've proposed a number. So I'm just wondering, in brief, how can the proposed recommendations proposed by the consultants be actually introduced into this site plan and the implications for the highways to get engaged?
Thank you. I do point out it is the layout is indicative. Much of this will be dealt with when it comes to the detailed plan. But Ms. Keller.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. I refer you to the connectivity section of the report at 6.37, and it does highlight that in terms of the proposed heads of terms in the section 106, that does prescriptively list the recommendations as part of the Alpha transport assessment in terms of securing monies for the proposed work. So it has been highlighted, and in terms of the scheme going forward, monies will be secured in respect to getting schemes to improve the connectivity, because you're quite right in terms of, as highlighted in my presentation, is that in terms of the crossing of the existing B4348, there isn't a existing sort of pedestrian crossing. So I'd say monies are being secured as part of the development forward to improve connectivity and sort of highway safety in that respect.
Okay. I'm just concerned about the rate of inflation and the cost of and what can actually be achieved at the end. I know I've seen that what will come through in 106, but I am concerned about what will be needed.
Councillor Rowe.
Sorry. Just to interrupt, it is index linked in terms of the section 106 contributions, because like you say, in terms of an application going forward, it could be over a number of years. So in terms of the figures cannot. Okay, thanks.
Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Chair. We're very fortunate with all of our officers when we have a report come forward that they are so thorough. These reports sometimes take months to put together, and before the report's put together, there is all sorts of consultation and pre-application advice sought. And so what we have in front of us is a very thorough report, and all angles have been considered. And for those members who turned up there yesterday and were able to see, this is a site in the middle of a village of, I believe it's quite a few hundred houses, with all the amenities that Ms. Carlisle mentioned: the schools, the shop, the hairdressers, restaurants. I believe it's got 2 restaurants. Anybody else know another village that's got 2 restaurants in it? A pub, a bus service. It's also got a talk community hub. It was the first one outside of the city to have a talk community hub. Mm-hmm. It's also a collection point for the absolutely fantastic Hertfordshire Community Recycling and Reuse Centre. I mean, I'm envious because they've got a really active litter picking group. It's a proper village, and I could not think of a more apt site for housing especially the social housing element, which gives youngsters who live in the Golden Valley and live in Peterchurch, want to carry on living where their families are, the opportunity to have a home. As I said, we've got a very, very thorough report in front of us. It covers all angles. And I know there's been a proposed to defer this, but it hasn't got a seconder now, so I would propose that we go with officer recommendation as is and give consent to this. Thank you, Chair.
Is that seconded? We take Councillor Cox. Councillor Fox, thank you. Now, Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree. It's a very good site, what Councillor Ronan has said. I've got concerns, obviously, over sewage. And I would like to see, I know we've got an indicative plan. I would like to see that if we could actually put anything about grey water in the plan at some point, or condition, because I think that's important, so we can actually collect some of the water coming from the homes. Again, what the PC said about connectivity, and if we could do a pathway, as a PC could do, if that could actually be brought forward, I think that's important, what we hear from the parish council. But apart from that, I haven't got any qualms. It's very good, I think, on the section 106. So I would be supporting that, but I would like to instigate that if we can do something with grey water, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
I think that may come at the later stage.
Yeah.
Councillor Bowen, did you want?
Yes, yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, for the affordable housing, is there some form or some way of making sure that applicants come from the local area? In Alton, for instance, in the affordable housing there at Little Furlongs, there was a condition that every applicant had to go through the parish council and could prove they had some local connection. Could we have something similar here as well, please?
Councillor Bowen, in terms of the drafting of section 106 agreement, it is standard practice that there's always, in terms of wording, this local sort of local connection to the village and the surrounding area. So that is covered within the final section 106 that would come forward.
Good. I'm glad to hear that, because it's not always absolutely apparent in the report, but that is reassuring here. Thank you.
You asked solicitor want to say.
I just want to add that is true. It's a very detailed local connection clause that's kept up to date with industry standards.
Right. Thank you.
Councillor Millmore.
Sorry, I was putting up my hand to second the application.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, all right. Yes, sorry.
Sorry, am I being called now?
Yes, sorry.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, I just want to pick up on Councillor Rowan, who I'm sure he's right, that every angle has been considered in advance. I just wanted to check on the environmental impact assessment regulations 2006, which require consent for loss of uncultivated land. This is permanent pasture for sites above 2 hectares, I believe, which clearly this is. And I just wondered if the case officer could comment on how that might be addressed.
I have to say,
unfortunately, I haven't got an answer for you, Councillor Milne, in terms of raising that question. I'm not about.
Is this something that would be addressed by condition, or if members were minded to approve, or?
If members are minded to approve, we will take that forward against the Milne, yes.
As a condition?
Not as a condition, but as part of the processing of the application.
What do you mean, as an informative then, or?
No, because you're not approving the application today. This is, we are not going to issue a decision from today's meeting. Following today's meeting, the applicant, the legal department will be requested to undertake, to produce the section 106 document to go to the applicant's solicitors. Then that will take several months. Then once that's been completed, the application will come back to the case officer to formalise a decision notice to be issued. At that particular point, the officer will undertake a further review of the application to ensure that there's been no policy change, to ensure the procedures haven't changed. And during that time period, Councillor Milne, we will review that request that you've made today.
Okay, thank you. So, sorry, I'm rather a long way away here. I might not have picked everything up here. So if we're not making a decision on this today,
You're making the decision to delegate the authority to the officer to grant permission subject to a section 106.
Oh, I will, yes, of course. Okay, thank you.
And that period can take several months between two sets of solicitors to resolve all the issues. Because you have a full raft of section 106 requirements for the site, which is excellent, and that will come forward. And that will come forward within the section 106, together with the requirements for the affordable housing for local people, etc., which is all contained within that document.
So those EIA regulations 2006, that would be picked up as part of the negotiations, whether or not it's.
We would pick it up following this meeting, yes.
Right, Councillor Johnson, then Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. And a question to Mr. Bishop, if I may. I confess that I'm slightly lost in some of the detail here. I understand rather better from your answer to Councillor Milne's question what we're actually here to do today. My only remaining concern, and I feel entirely in support of this application, my only concern is that, or I'd like reassurance that by completing this meeting today and delegating authority to the officers, we don't introduce some form of ratchet that we can't go back over, with particular reference to the water supply that was so I thought very carefully and well presented by the local member. I want to be sure, and I'd be grateful for your assurance, that following today, if we agree to delegate the authority to the officers, that all of the issues regarding the water referred to by the local member will be picked up. What I don't want is for us to finish up with an argument between councillors and the officers rather than councillors and the developers. And that's what concerns me. So can I be sure that it will be picked up, Mr. Bishop? Thank you.
Yes, you can be sure, Councillor Johnson, that will be taken forward.
Thank you.
Can I say, if we delegate this, we only delegate what the application is, it isn't really detailed planning, and that will come back at some point. Bearing in mind the current situation nationally with cost of living, I'm not sure when developers will develop on some of these sites. Councillor Norman.
Thank you, Chair. I really just want to stress that I absolutely agree with Councillor Brown. It is an excellent report that's full of detail and very thorough indeed. But I also just simply want to report that we have serious concerns raised by the local member, by the parish council, by an independent ecology advisor, and a number of objectors or people who've expressed concern. And I really don't think we should be taking that lightly. Proportionate principle is absolutely vital. As I say, we've made very serious mistakes in the past on this particular issue, and I'm very loath to see it happen again. It seems to me that we should still be insisting that the HRA situation is resolved before we allow any sort of go ahead. And if Mr. Bishop was able to say that that would be the case, and that would be a little different, but I don't believe that's what I'm saying.
Mr. Bishop.
No, at the present time, under the current procedures, a HRA is not required for this application. That's the current position from council officers, from our ecologists. The site is located within an area where a HRA is not required, as confirmed by Natural England. So that's where we are as regards that. If during the time period that Section 26 is fully put together and policies or procedures change, then that will be reviewed at the time when the decision notice is to be issued. And once that decision notice is issued, that is a time if anyone wishes to challenge it. That's when a challenge will be issued. But at the present time, we are not in that position.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chair. It's, I just want to pick up about the connectivity. Would that be looked at the landscape plan to look at, and because something I'm really, it's about children will have to walk some distance to go and play in the local playground, but what there will be locally to actually have something. So would that be picked up, the connectivity and the landscaping for the recreational area as well, please?
Councillor Watson, yes, that would be picked up under any sort of forthcoming application under the reserve matters in terms of layout and landscaping.
Great, thank you.
Okay, just to clarify on that particular point, the plan is indicative at the present time. That is just to identify that you can get 89 units on there. It's purely indicative. What will happen following the approval is that the developer will come to the authority, hopefully submit a pre-application, so that we can then become involved in the formulation of the layout, taking on board all the comments which will be minuted today, and certain notes will be added to the permission as well, so that we can inform any developer moving forward. Because I or Mr. Long may not be here when it comes forward. Hopefully, will be, but we'll see. But that's how it will work, and the landscape, etc., will all be picked up as part of the reserve matters proposal. Thank you,
Councillor Milne.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Whether or not the EMA regulations 2006 is picked up formally as a condition, I am nonetheless concerned by the sheer number of conditions. There are 26 of them, and NPPF 56 reminds us that planning conditions should be kept to a minimum and only imposed where necessary, relevant planning and relevant be permitted that are enforceable, precise and reasonable. And an awful lot of these conditions, and I do include the HRA one, the one that's required by number 7 for dealing with the fowl, are very nearly unenforceable, particularly the ones around travel, where they expect a monitoring over a period of years on the success of the travel plan, or the landscape scheme, which also requires a schedule of maintenance and monitoring over a period of years. I mean, those sorts of conditions are fundamentally non-NPPF 56 compliant, because we don't have the resources to monitor and maintain them. As I was travelling to the site meeting yesterday, Councillor Hardwick reflected upon a request that, as members, we review and revisit old applications to see how they work out in practice. I think that's a jolly good idea. And I would say that if I am still on planning committee in 5 years and this is approved, we go and look at it, and we find that a lot of these 26 conditions are not being met because frankly they're not enforceable, then I think that is a lesson for us. And I do include the condition around the HRA. I completely support Councillor Norman's view. We should take an extremely a circumspect approach to the application of the HRA. There clearly is a difference of view between officers and the legal opinion that the local councillors has obtained as to the sense of obtaining that, the risk of not obtaining that, to which the council would be exposed. And so if a second was still required for this, Councillor Norman's motion for the deferral language seconded. Thank you, Chair. That's all I need to say.
Yeah. Can I say we already, Councillor Bowen withdrew his seconding, and there was a proposer and a seconder for the officer's recommendation before that. If you wish to go to Councillor Norman's proposal, we can do that if the motion on the table is defeated. Is that clear? Sorry. That is.
Well, my understanding was that councillor Norman's motion came first. It was just simply because I didn't get my hand up quick enough to support the seconding of it. Well, I did, but I wasn't noticed.
Quite honestly, they were.
Well, I recognise, Chair.
Very simply amended. If you want to vote against it, against this particular proposal on the basis of it being deferred, you just vote against it, and then there will be an additional proposal to.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, I have no other speakers have indicated that they wish to speak. That we've had the debate. I'll now hand over to the officers if you want to.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to pick up the point of Councillor Milne, he's quite right. We do not put conditions on for the sake of putting them on. We do try and limit them, but these conditions are enforceable, particularly item number 7, which prevents any development taking place on site. It's a pre-commencement condition. It's very enforceable. So I would confirm that all those conditions which you have there before you are conditions which give the local planning authority the ability to tackle issues with the developer if they step that line. You've had a good debate this morning, Chairman, on this particular application. It's been identified. The site is located within the settlement boundary for Peter Church. It's an identified site, allocated site within the neighbourhood plan. There is a full raft of Section 106 contributions with this application. The issues are solely related to the matters relating to the HRA. You've heard the advice from the officers in relation to the requirement not for that, not for one to be taken at the present time. You've also heard from me, Chairman, on that particular point, in essence, that if procedures and policies change before the decision is issued, then that will be reviewed at that time. The proposal is to delegate to officers to progress to Section 106. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, then we'll now go to the local member to end the debate.
So I have, just a very clear question here. We have an assertion in the room that Natural England have advised that, and it's illogical to my mind, because the door supports qualifying features of the SAC. It has lamprey, eel, and otters and whitefall crayfish. They had to be, not the otters because they were somewhere else, but they had to be rescued recently in August because of the terrible drought by the Environment Agency. Why do the Environment Agency do it? Because they're under duty to do it by the habitat regulations. We have an assertion that habitat regulations is not required, but I have asked for this statement in writing from somewhere. Where is this document? Where? And it hasn't been produced. Now, I'm not denying that maybe that's what the planning department think, but it would be helpful to the planning committee to have it stated that all those watercourses in the Golden Valley don't matter, which quite frankly, I find really saddening. And under the rules, my understanding is that as the competent authority, we have to identify where there's risks. Now, we didn't. Natural England didn't give us a very helpful statement like they did on the Somerset levels that, we're in a sensitive catchment and we advise X, Y, and Z. They didn't do that. And that's a long time coming and it needs to be there. But we can't wait on that. Rachel Joy, when she was talking about our Phosphate Commission, basically said, we are looking as a local planning authority to do everything we can do to ensure that we behave in such a way that protects our catchments. We can't wait for somebody who's being negligent to tell us when we can see it's staring us straight in the face. The only comment we have from the ecologist is that should there not be capacity, then this will trigger this LPA to consult with NRW. I go back to that point. It hasn't been done. Natural England were asleep at the wheel when all the chicken farms were introduced into our county. It's absolutely crushing our biodiversity, and it will also then crush our economy as a result. And it's, you know, unless this planning committee is the last bastion of protection. And we all voted here for a WPZ because we're very concerned about it, but we can't just say, oh, it's all right, we'll do it later, because the rules say that you have to refer to the relevant nature authority. And then, do you know, I did an FOI on this, and not once has this local planning authority consulted with NRW, despite the fact that in the guidance for HRA, it says that the competent authority, the local planning authority, needs to decide which one is going to take the lead, whether it be NE or NRW. The Golden Valley is stuck in this invidious position where everybody is saying, or we're just resting on our laurels and saying we don't need protection. Those creatures do need protection. Why did the EA come in? And it was Laura Bullock from the EA who came to do it. Why did she come in? Councillors, the public are looking to us to do the right thing here, to see that we're people of our word, that we understand the incremental damage that's done every time we don't clearly assess the impact under the rules as they are stated in HRA of our planning applications in the Y catchment. If we don't do it, why should anybody else do it? Sorry, that was a useless expletive. I take that back. If we don't do it, why should we rely on everybody else to do it? We've got consciences, we've got brains. You haven't got a printed statement before you that says any have advised that we don't have to do those things. And I just would implore the planning committee not to reject it, as Councillor Rowan and the planning officer has said, you know, it's the perfect place for a planning development. The local community want it, but let's do it, please, in the right order, and don't hand over this and say we can condition it afterwards, because the rules clearly say we can't condition it afterwards. You know, as for the S106, our constitution says that those things have to be agreed before planning permission is granted. We're told we're not granting planning permission, we're granting delegated authority. However, it's all cart before horse. I want to feel secure that we have something beautiful and environmentally non-damaging, and that the agent and the developer can negotiate clearly, get what they need out of the situation, and the local community can get it. But I won't have it done at risk to the environment in the Golden Valley.
Councillor Hewitt, we just exceeded the time. Councillor Bishop, do you want to say anything over that particular point of it? No. Right, we have a proposal in front of us to give planning permission, not to give planning permission, to delegate authority as outlined in the recommendation from the officers. Can I ask those in favour, please show? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 in favour. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4. And any abstentions? No, I don't think so. Right, that is carried. Can we now adjourn for 10 minutes break, couple of break, and can we live stream? And Ms. Toy, applicant, please take your seat in the public gallery. Thank you. Welcome you to the meeting. We will call you up to speak on following the officer's presentation of the application. The application in front of us is the Juniper Cottage Pike Hatton, Ludlow, Herefordshire. Ms. Morris will make the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. The application before the committee today is made in full for the construction of a riding arena for private use and associated groundworks.
Can I just add a little closer? I'm sure it's some of the people at the back.
The application is made part retrospectively, with the majority of groundworks being completed. The proposed riding arena will measure 35 metres by 18 metres with timber post and rail fencing around the edge. The scheme is assessed under the adopted Herefordshire Local Plan Core Strategy and the Wigmore Group Neighbourhood Development Plan made in September 2019. This can be afforded significant weight for the purposes of decision-making in relation to this application. Additionally relevant and material is the National Planning Policy Framework. The broad location of the application site is demarked by the red star and is found to the southwest of Kilports Lane, approximately 0.8 miles to the northeast of Pipeston and 2.6 miles southwest of Ludlow. Next slide, please. In slightly more detail, this slide shows the full extent of the blue line boundary, as well as the application site's relationship with the neighbouring dwelling and surrounding open countryside. The site is designated as a local wildlife site, and the proposed location of the riding arena is shown by the red line. Next slide, please. On the screen now is a topographical plan of the site before the groundworks were carried out, and below that is a topographical plan of the existing site and proposed riding arena.
No.
Sorry, I've moved on. Apologies. Yeah. On the screen now is a topographical plan of the site before the groundworks were carried out. To the top and to the bottom is a topographical plan of the existing site and the proposed riding arena. Next slide, please. Here are 3 photos from within and adjacent to the application site to give members some context. The map indicates the location direction of the photos coordinated by colour. The photo outlined in blue to the top left of the slide shows the view from the field gate across the application site southwest. The photograph outlined in green is taken from the site's access looking towards the application site, and the third photograph outlined as red, taken roughly from the centre of the riding arena looking back towards the access. Next slide, please. The top photograph outlined in blue shows the view from the application site looking towards the road and public right of way, whereas the photograph edged in red shows the view back towards, from the road back towards the application site. There is no core strategy policy that specifically deals with equestrian activities and use, and therefore the main areas of consideration are residential amenity, highways, landscape, and ecological impact. The site has previously been used for grazing of the applicant's horses. The proposed riding arena would be for private use only, something which can be secured by a condition. There are no nearby residential neighbours to the south and west where the use is proposed, and the nearest dwelling is to the northeast in excess of 200 metres away from the application site. In the officer's view, the privately exercising small numbers of horses would not cause significant noise or overlooking given the proposed site of the riding arena. Furthermore, the proposed location of the riding arena would be largely screened from the roadside by existing vegetation as can be seen on the photos on the screen now. The proposal is to utilise the existing access, and there is no indication for intention for the riding arena to be used for commercial purpose. As such, there will be no additional traffic to the site other than what currently exists. The council's area engineer offers no objection to the proposal. Next slide, please. The application is supported by a preliminary ecological appraisal and biodiversity enhancement management plan, as well as a landscape plan, which can be seen on the screen now. This sees the reinstatement of the hedgerow and tree line to the north of the application site, as well as wildflowers to be planted to the south, and a number of birdback, hedgehog, and hedgehog boxes and insect hotels to be placed across the site. Neither the council's ecology nor landscape officer object to the proposal subject to condition. The recommended conditions on this proposal request: all the planting in the landscape plan be carried out in the first planting season. That a report is submitted by a licensed ecologist confirming that all the habitat and biodiversity enhancements proposed have been fully implemented, as well as the submission of the schedule of landscape management and maintenance for a period of 10 years, 10 years being considered reasonable for the plan to reach maturity. Conditions are also recommended to restrict external lighting and to ensure the riding arena is for private use only. A couple of questions were raised for the site visit yesterday, one relating to the type of fibre surface material proposed. I've been advised that this would be a sand and fibre mix which drains well and stays put. Another question related to the drainage arrangements. These are not shown on the plans, and in light of this, I would suggest updating the drainage conditions to request further details. In summary, the proposal is considered to record with the development plan when read as a whole, which is not outweighed by any other material considerations. The nature of this development is appropriate to the rural location or the understanding with the solely private use in connection with Juniper Cottage. There are no technical objections to this proposal subject to the aforementioned conditions. It's considered that there would be no significant impacts on landscape character, residential amenity, ecology, drainage, or highway safety. The application therefore accords the principal determined criteria of the relevant development plan policies, and as such, is recommended for approval. Thank you, members, and check up on the
Thank you, Ms. Morris. And now we come to the speakers. Can I invite the local residents, Ms. Owen, Mr. Jones, and Mr. Owen, to make their presence. You have 3 minutes between you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'd just like to explain, as the applicant's only neighbour, why I think this application should be refused, echoing 800 people in an online petition, many official objectors, the Parish Council and Herefordshire Wildlife Trust. The applicant has reprofiled with a bulldozer an unspoiled Herefordshire Valley without permission, land which is officially designated as a local wildlife site. The applicant has, in my opinion, calculatedly attempted to manipulate the planning system to get this through, highlighted in several official objections. Approving this application would send out a dangerous message to like-minded developers that destroying protected landscapes and asking for permission afterwards is an acceptable practice. Approval would be in contravention of a number of planning policies and would need additional groundworks in order to complete the project. The bulldozer will be back. If this is approved, I'd assume I could then do the same on my land on the opposite side of the valley in constructing a 5-a-side football pitch. I wouldn't, because it would be an act of environmental vandalism. The applicant has bulldozed her land regularly and substantially without permission in 3 years since she moved to the county. Nature should now be allowed to do what it can to put some life back into it.
Thank you. I'm a local resident who lives near Juniper Cottage, and I witnessed firsthand the appalling ecological vandalism that has taken place at this designated local wildlife site. It cannot be ignored that this is now, to all intents and purposes, a retrospective planning application. A significant damage to the landscape and biodiversity has already been caused by work carried out without planning permission, but with the full knowledge that it was required. Given the very brief amount of time we have to voice our objections today, I sincerely hope that committee members have had the opportunity to read through the numerous objections in detail and seen for themselves photographic evidence showing the scale and destruction involved in this inappropriate development. The relevant material planning considerations to be taken into account are loss of trees, green space and ecological habitats, and public visual amenity. The application breaches numerous policies in the National Planning Policy Framework, Herefordshire Core Strategy, and Wigmore Parish's Local Development Plan, which there is not enough time to list today, but which are specifically detailed in my own objection. And to approve this application would set a precedent for others to completely ignore planning regulations, carry out whatever environmental damaging work they want, and then simply apply for retrospective planning permission. It makes a mockery of the whole planning system, and I implore the committee to come to the right decision today and refuse permission. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I am a local resident and a trustee of the Friends of Mortimer Forest, a charity whose objects include protecting wildlife habitat in the area, which includes Juniper Cottage. One endangered species we are concerned about is hazel dormice, which have been found in surveys of wildlife on Juniper Hill above Juniper Cottage. Signs of their presence have also been found in the wooded valley below the cottage. It is a reasonable presumption that they also used to inhabit the hedge which the applicant destroyed, or at least that they and other species used that hedge as a corridor for moving about. The destruction of that habitat was reckless and premeditated. Whatever else is done, that wildlife corridor should, in my opinion, be fully reinstated.
Thank you. We've just gone over time, but I allowed a little bit of time for the handovers, as it were, from one to another. Can I now ask Mr. Toy to speak on support of the application?
Chairman and members, when I retired from a career as an airline pilot, I moved here from a small hamlet in Hampshire. I wanted to pursue my passion and hobby of endurance riding and looking after my 2 horses. This county has stunning riding. It's a joy. I'm experienced equestrian. I've represented England 5 times in recent years. I'm seeking consent for a small menage to help school and improve my horse's capabilities. I live on a de-restricted road and my gated entrance is on a blind bend. A menage would give a safe place to ride. Since moving to Bybaston, I've tried to integrate myself into the small community. Disappointingly, I've encountered some local opposition to my intended plans. These concerns seem to have become disproportionate to what is planned. I hope these concerns will fade as these improvements are instigated and benefits recognised. When I bought Juniper Cottage, it had been neglected. I've invested greatly in upgrading the property and the land. I'm working with an ecologist on a 5-year plan to enhance biodiversity and I hope restore the pond. Turning to the Menage, I want to praise your officers for their thorough and unbiased report. We've worked hard to address concerns raised during the planning application process. Your landscape officer stated, "I'm satisfied with the amended information that it has addressed my previous concerns." Your ecology officer has made pertinent points regarding the justification and validity of the local wildlife site designation. I trust this will be noted by members. In summary, he said, subject to conditions, there's no overall ecology objection to this Menage. Your planning officer concludes, drawing together all the information, this proposal is considered in accordance with the council's development plan. The proposal is not outweighed by any other material considerations, so it's considered appropriate in a rural location. There are no technical objections. The proposed enhancements would be a long-term biodiversity gain on site, as there are no significant impacts on landscape character, residential amenity, ecology, drainage, or highways. And she recommends approval of this application subject to conditions. I state unequivocally that I'm happy to abide by recommended conditions should the committee be minded to approve this application. Finally, let's put this application in perspective. It's for a small, unlit Menage for personal use in a rural location. I trust members will decide to support the recommendations made by your professional officers. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Can you now, the speakers, please take their place back in the public gathering? Thank you. The local member is Councillor Gandhi, local ward member. She speaks first and has the right to speak at the end of the meeting, end of the debate. She has 10 minutes this time. Usually. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank all of those members of the committee who turned up at the site visit yesterday. As you will have heard, read, and hopefully seen, this development in an extremely rural part of my ward is in the most part retrospective, and much ecological damage has already been done. The applicant applied for a 40 by 20 Menage in November 2020, and this was withdrawn in June 2021 due to objections from both landscape officers and the ecologist, who stated that the proposed site was within an area designated a local wildlife site. I quote, "The site is an ecologically interesting location with multiple priority habitats, such as ancient woodland, triple SI woodland, and protected species such as wood white and pearl bordered fritillary butterflies and multiple bat species. The wider woodland known to support dormice. No loss of any local wildlife site would be acceptable. Please note, no loss, as this indicates the potential presence of an irreplaceable habitat. I am saying this, as I'm sure you've read the earlier report. As a result, the application was withdrawn on the 24th of June 2021. But this did not stop the applicant from commencing unauthorised work on the site and continuing to do so for a considerable period of time with bulldozers and other machinery on site. Much damage was done both from an ecological point of view and from a visual perspective. And in my opinion, just putting a spade in the ground now, let alone a digger, which was the case during 2021, would only cause further ecological harm. Those who visited the site yesterday would have been unable to appreciate the amount of earth which has been removed to try to flatten part of this site. The applicant was required by our enforcement team to submit a new application in approximately December 21, which in my opinion is partly, if not mainly, retrospective. This application was for a 35 by 18 menage with associated groundworks. It does not include the stone hard standing path of large rocks, which many of us manoeuvred over yesterday, which are also within the site of this application, but have not been included in the application. With regards to the second application, to my amazement, and to others too, the same ecologist gave no objection. And I began to doubt if it actually was the same ecologist. We are always, incidentally, the reinstatement of the hedge is because the ancient hedge was removed without permission. We are always advised as councillors that you must judge an application on what is in front of you, and you cannot consider what might happen in the future. And yet our ecologist starts his report by commenting that nationally a review of local wildlife sites is currently being progressed to ensure only surveyed and relevant sites are designated as local wildlife sites. And this site perhaps may not have been included in the designation going forward. That may or may not be true, but at present it is a local wildlife site, and that is what it should be judged on. I find this opening paragraph not only misleading, but frankly unacceptable from one of our ecologists considering a planning application. We do not deal with perhapses in planning, we deal with facts. The ecologist also basically states the application should be granted because the ecological damage has been done. Is that really a reason for granting permission? If it is, then why should anyone apply for a planning permission if we take such a view? Finally, and the piece de resistance, it is recommendation that due to the level of ecological damage, the completed scheme should be hereafter monitored every 3 years for the next 30 years with an ecology report to demonstrate all features have been managed and maintained, accompanied by a record of species present, shall be supplied to the local planning authority and the Heritage Biological Records Centre, and that the first monitoring report to be supplied by the 1st of April 2026. Reason, to ensure that all protected species are considered and habitats enhanced, having regard to the Conservation of Habitats and Species Regulations 2017. Let us be clear, this recommendation recognises the harm already done ecologically and shows clearly that no further work should be carried out, and that grass which is already beginning to grow over the excavations should be allowed to continue. Who would monitor this condition? What would be the penalty for non-compliance? And who would enforce it? The application must be refused and allow the various important wildlife to return. Not another spade should be put in the ground. We are always being told by officers not to include recommendations that cannot be monitored. And many of us know that even those that can often are not, as they rely solely on residents noticing a breach of conditions. Who would monitor this? Who would still be working for the authority in 30 years? Who would still be alive? I note the report to the committee that this recommendation has been watered down to 10 years, but that doesn't alter the fact that this was the recommendation of the ecologists. This appears to me and others to be a compromise attempt to get this application approved. Whether it is 30 years or 10 years, my comments are similar. Who will monitor this? What would be the penalty for non-compliance? And who will enforce it? We all recognise the harm that's been done to the wildlife on and around this site. Surely the only acceptable outcome must be to leave the land to recover. Enough is enough. Don't be seen as a committee that talks about preserving natural habitats wherever possible, particularly on designated local wildlife sites, and then approve an application which goes completely against what you say, both in planning and in other council committees. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Gandy. Right, now councillor Foxton.
Thank you, Chair. Yesterday, thank you. Yesterday's site visit was a reminder of what a stunningly beautiful county we have the great privilege to live in, with magnificent, breathtaking views. Therefore, I am minded of the importance of preserving our beautiful rural county for subsequent generations. In this application, we are looking at a very small area. However, it is designated as a local wildlife site. I believe the work undertaken without planning permission is rather bold and brutal for the landscape. The removal of a hedgerow should be a last resort, as stated by the Hereford Wildlife Trust. Removing an ancient hedge, destroying the habitat of wildlife, and reinstating a new hedge helps, but why remove an ancient hedge? It takes 100 years for a new hedge to be truly established. Digging out and terracing a sloping field, laying a new track without planning permission, demonstrates a cavalier attitude and should not be condoned. The ecology report suggests monitoring the scheme every 3 years for the next 30 years, an ambitious plan, now reduced to 10 years. It suggests ecology are very concerned about the future of wildlife in this area. Any record of wildlife taken now will not reveal what has already been lost. I learned from Councillor Bowen that there's a herd of only 80 long-haired fallow deer living in Mortimer Forest and cannot be found anywhere else in the world, even rarer than the Siberian tiger. I mean, what a county. Surely this area is the jewel in the crown of Herefordshire, and we have a duty of care to protect it. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Foxton. Councillor Watson.
Thank you. I'd like to support Councillor Foxton's clear statement. I actually found it, I didn't unfortunately go to the site visit, but it's always really sad for me to hear that someone has actually applied for an application, withdrawn, and then done the work anyway. I think the other issue too is that enforcement would be done by ecology and not by planning enforcement. I think the planning enforcement officer was called in because works were being done. But I know from a hedgerow being removed in my own local parish is that it is up to then ecology to enforce anything. And at the present, it's a very thin team. I would like to actually move a motion to actually refuse this, because having learned that the applicant had gone for an application but withdrawn, she could have carried out surveys with the Herefordshire Wildlife Trust, which is currently offering free surveys up to March next year to update its local wildlife sites in Herefordshire. She could have checked, are there any great crested newts in the pond, looking at bat flights, foraging, slow worms, doing reptile surveys. None of these are actually available to us because, and the removal of a hedgerow is, I find it just absolutely shameful that someone can be, I have to stop myself because I'm my voice is shaking to demonstrate my anger at, finding this out. So I want to support the ward member, councillor Gandy, and thank her, and also for those who defend nature. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Watson. Can I just remind members, and I think it's important, we mustn't be prejudiced by the fact that it's a retrospective application, but bearing in mind the original application and the indication of where we would have, where the officer's recommendations would have been, we can bear that in mind, because we have to consider if this came to us before these works were done, would we have given planning permission or not? And if we consider it on that basis, I think we probably arrive at where you're thinking, but be careful. Councillor Bowen.
Chair, I'd second that proposal.
Right. Second.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, this is and thank you also for the comprehensive report by our officer and the very comprehensive response, well, that's not response, but words from our local member, which was very wholesome, I think, and gave us a very good view of what's been going on and what has happened and what should not have happened as well. And I have to say, it is as it is a retrospective planning application, and I know they have every right to be heard just like any other application, but it is not just sad, but I feel cynical that having withdrawn the first one, the applicant then just carried on and did it. It doesn't endear you to the applicant, I have to say, but I'm sure she's a very fine person and excellent pilot, but I think this is not an application we should support. I have much experience myself of building these all-weather riding services on my neighbours. We're not talking about ménage à trois or quatre or anything else for that matter. But I know in a situation like that, you do a huge amount of dig out, and that is going to be quite destructive to anything that is there at the time. I'm very aware of that. I've done lots of arenas and some with an even bigger dig out than that, but that is pretty considerable. It's what's called cut and fill, and you do a lot of damage in the process. I have to say that all my arenas were under planning permission and were perfectly legitimate.
I wouldn't think anything else.
Some might. But this is something that, as the chairman has so aptly pointed out, I doubt we were given permission in the first place. It is a very special part of the world, and I think it is sad that we have done so much damage has been done already. Possibly some of it irreversible, but it's amazing how nature compensates in the end, allowed to get on with it. And I will certainly not be supporting the officer's recommendation. Sorry about that.
Councillor Norman.
Thank you, Chair. And I echo the comments made by previous councillors, and particularly the detail given by Councillor Watson, which I won't go over, but absolutely agree with. We're told we mustn't take account of the fact that it's retrospective. I appreciate that completely, but I think we do have to be aware that if this had come to us, before the work had been done, we would have been able to put in place all sorts of possible measures to monitor, to supervise, etc., to make sure that the minimal damage was done in the development of the site. So that is a very different situation. I'm not saying we would have got it, but it would have been very, very different. And I absolutely agree with the point made by Councillor Bowen. Cynical is the word. To put it forward, to withdraw it, and to then do the work is cynical beyond belief, really. And it sets an incredibly bad example if we go ahead and support this, because, why would anyone bother with an application if they can get away with it in this way? So, as you gather, I won't be supporting it. I think it's very unfortunate that our ecologists, who I respect hugely, felt that at this point there was so little left, or the damage that had been done was, significantly bad, that they felt obliged in the circumstances not to oppose it. Seems to me very, very unfortunate indeed. But we also have the landscape comments, the adverse impact on that very special landscape, which I think we need to take account of as well. And of course, there are comments from the Wildlife Trust, the Parish Council, and individuals who put forward their views, as well as our local members. So I think all these people clearly feel very, very strongly about this. And I think, in my point of view, I absolutely agree with them and do not want to be seen as setting an example. So support the proposal to refuse. Thank you.
Thank you. As of yet, I have no further indication. Councillor Milne.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, at yesterday's site meeting, Councillor Hardwick and I got the play of the site onto our footwear and had a good look around. And he, man of the land, as he is, observed to me a process of hydrostatic solid fluxion. Those weren't the words he used, slumping, in other words. So what's going on the site is that as it's basically a clay mudstone, the natural geology side area, I believe. What's going on is that as it saturates in rain, the material, the recently excavated material, moves down the hill. And I recognise that condition 8 attempts to guard against this, albeit the condition is framed as though it were a pre-commencement condition, namely to ask for appropriate takeaway infiltration features to try and guard against this process. In respect to the conversation we were having earlier about the application of NPPF 56, which does remind us not to use conditions that require discharge before development, they should be avoided, because they always imply really that there are shortcomings in the application. Such conditions need to be addressed really before through the design process before they come to committee. And so it is a disappointment not to see some sort of drawing which attempts to deal with this process of solid fluxion, which is a threat to the our obligation under the Habitats regulations, as the condition 8 observes, since clearly we do not want this material going down into the watercourse. So I do share members' misgivings about this application. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chairman. To me, this looks like a classic case of somebody who's assumed that forgiveness will be easier to gain than permission. I sympathise truly, these are not just words, I sympathise with our officers. They find themselves faced with a very difficult position. The rules as written are not flexible enough to adapt. They almost preclude any form of moral judgment on this. To me, this is morally wrong, and I will not support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Are there any other? Sorry. Oh, Councillor Rowan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I couldn't actually see a situation in which either by delegated powers or by this committee that this application would have been granted before this work had been carried out. We'd have gone there yesterday and seen it as it was 2-3 years ago. Consider the damage that would have been done to what I'm calling one of the smallest V-shaped valleys I've ever seen, in an area which is a local wildlife site, and I do believe adjacent to a SSSI. We would have looked at each other and said, absolutely not. Now, that work has been carried out. I really do not see how we can give consent to this. I do absolutely back up what Councillor Johnson said with regard to our planning officers and how they see it and interpret it and want to take it forward. But for us to give consent to this would be almost like giving consent to an application to put PVC windows in the cathedral. It is, I do see it as that bad. I will be going against officer's recommendation today, and I will be supporting the proposal from the floor.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Then, officers, do you wish to? Mr. Bishop?
Thank you, Chairman. I fully understand where members are coming from, but please, if they will, when they do vote, look to the back of their minds the fact that it's a retrospective application. Please consider the application as you have in front of you, which is to create a horse riding arena in this particular area. I've heard the resolution to refuse application and seconded. We will need to have reasons put forward and policies, etc. I am prepared to help as regards that, but please bear in mind that you have your two professional officers, ecology and landscape, who both do not now object to the application. The reason that the ecologists objected to the original application was there was no ecology report, and that was then subsequently prepared for this application, and that's why the ecologists withdrew their objections to the scheme. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you for discussion today, councillors, on this item. I just want to add that if you are minded to refuse and go against officer recommendation, and when you think about those reasons, can't be purely just because of the history of the site. That's what I want to add there.
Yeah, can I add also to that? I did actually have to say that we have to put that in the back of our mind, but is it, if we've seen this without what has happened, would we have given planning permission in the first place? And I have great doubts about that we would. So bearing in mind that situation, I know it's a difficult place that planners and the council finds itself in. But those are the facts, and it may cause greater difficulties for the council by not granting planning permission. But we have to be consistent. Would we have given planning permission for this application if it wasn't for the fact that it had already been partially done? So bear that in mind, and we'll do that. Councillor Gandy, please.
Thank you, and thank you to the comments of the committee. I would probably slightly differ with the comments made by Mr. Bishop, in that I believe that actually the first paragraph of the ecologist's report, which basically says that in the future this site might not be considered to be a local wildlife site, has in fact possibly coloured the view that he has taken. And I do agree that the first application didn't include an ecology report with it. The second application certainly did, and the second application made it absolutely clear, which was the ecology report provided by the applicant, that the hedge should not be removed, and yet the hedge was removed. On top of that, as a result of visiting yesterday, those of us who went to the visit will note that although it's not a part of this application, the field we walked through to get to the site is also designated a local wildlife site. It also has a hard track going through it with stone, which will require a planning application, retrospective. And so we're in a situation where an applicant has come forward with an application, has withdrawn it when it was obvious it was going to be refused, has gone ahead and done the work, has removed an ancient hedge, has then put down a hard track piece of path through both the application site and another part of the field, which will be subject to a retrospective planning application, and wants to build a menage. Now, I represent Mortimer Ward, and we have a number of menages in my ward, so I have no issue with menages. There are plenty of properties that have come up for sale in the last 3, 4, 5 years that would have been perfectly suitable and of a price to build a menage on a flat piece of land. Why would you buy a site that has got a hill on it as steep as that one when your intention is to build a menage? Now, I know the applicant will almost certainly be of the view and has said to me herself that perhaps she bought the wrong property. But we are where we are. If you want to build a menage, you find a house and a site which is suitable for what you intend to do. You do not buy a site that is steep to the extreme and then decide to flatten it in order to fulfill your dream. And although I feel very sorry for the situation that she finds herself in, we as a committee cannot fulfill that dream by allowing the ecological damage to continue on this particular site. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have the final summing up, and we have a proposer and seconder. Can I ask those in favour of the recommendation?
Yeah.
Reason, sorry.
Yes, going up, to actually state them. Okay. I'm just looking at the Wigmore Parish Council NDP that has been ratified, and their objective 1, I think, says that the historic landscape settings and natural environment of the Wigmore Group villages should be conserved and enhanced for future generations. So that is definitely one to put down, because it's about conserving local landscape features. And yeah, so it's policy WG1A. And the other ones are LD1, LD2, LD3, SS1, SS6. All because it's a priority habitat, as it said. I think that the Heritage Wildlife Trust made it quite clear for MPPF 174C as a priority habitat and a local wildlife site. I think for me is that if this application had gone through pre-application advice, we would be able to have access to the surveys, because for a local wildlife site, they would have had to do surveys for great crested newts, for back surveys, and to do a retrospective preliminary ecological assessment. Yeah, I'm afraid. Yeah. Anyway, they're my decision, my list recommendations for why it should be. And if there needs to be any subject clause, I'm quite happy to read out the core strategy, which I bring to the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bishop.
Yes, the SNAP. SS1, SS6, LD1, LD2, LD3, Wigmore, WG1, and the MPPF Chapter 15 will be the appropriate policies to put on into and in relation to the detrimental impact of the proposal have on the landscape and ecology of the area, woven around those policies.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bishop.
All right. So no further comments. I don't think we've had the local members summing up. Can I know the proposer and seconder have proposed that this item be reduced on the grounds as outlined? Can I have those in favour of that recommendation? Please show. I believe it is unanimous. But I now thank you all for your attendance this morning. I wish you safe journey home.